We'll call this meeting to order. It's a special meeting for March 2nd. And we'll begin, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one email that came in for public audience, and this is from Joan Coe. It reads, I am concerned that the Meadowwood project has continually surfaced as an open space acquisition. The only one promoting it is town manager Maria Capriola and the Land Trust. The Meadowwood project provides over $200,000 a year in taxes. With fewer children participating in sports, there's no need for more fields. There's a vacant field on Barn Door Hills that can be used for recreation. With all the town demands, the Meadowwood property should not be a priority. The land has been vacant for many years with no interest in the development of the property. There are concerns that there would be issues with contamination mitigation of the land that would greatly increase the costs in developing the land. The town has acres of land that is designated open space, and revenues from the vacant property could reduce taxes. Why would the town take a taxed property off the rolls and increase the debt for the taxpayers? The $2.2 million in cost to the taxpayers will have additional costs year after year. Why should the town share the costs with the Land Trust? If the Land Trust consider this property viable for their acquisition, they should raise the full amount of the sale. As the town adds more infrastructure to the Meadowwood land, the overhead costs that are not mentioned will add additional costs year after year. This will require more employees and machinery to maintain the land and other overhead costs that has not been discussed. There has never been any interest in placing the Meadowwood land in the plan of development as a priority and should not be approved. This project should be dead on arrival. All my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter @JoanCo, and on Facebook. For anyone who wants to participate in public audience in any future meetings, they can send an email to our town clerk, Erica Butler, ebutler@simsbury-ct.gov. If you'd like to join our Zoom meeting yourself, you can, but we ask that you register with Tom Fitzgerald, tfitzgerald@simsbury-ct.gov. Okay, so we basically have one major agenda item, which is to learn more and ask questions about the Board of Ed's capital needs. And I wanted to recognize Susan Salina, Chair of the Board of Ed. Jeff, thank you so much for being on. Hopefully I'm not missing anyone else from the Board of Ed. Who am I turning it over to for a brief presentation?
No, Eric, I can tee it up, and then I'm gonna pass it to Neil. So, okay. Appreciate the opportunity tonight to talk about our capital, and really, my understanding is we're going to focus on the three main pieces we have in year one, which are a renovation project at Latimer Lane School, a bleacher project, and then district security. So, I wanted to take the opportunity and thank all the Board of Selectmen members that took the time to come to tour Latimer Lane. I know we got a lot of positive feedback on that, and an opportunity to really get boots on the ground and see the condition of the building. So I know people are busy and really appreciate the members' willingness to do that. So we have a pretty brief slide deck. Neil is going to do the first piece on Latimer, and maybe we can work through the questions on that. And then Jason Casey is going to work through the remaining two pieces, and we can certainly answer any questions people have. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Amy. First, let me apologize that my camera seems to have conked out this afternoon. So whether I have it off or on, I'm not appearing. So I'm.
Neil, I assumed you were maybe one of the 200 homes in town still without power. But.
No, okay. I'm not. But we'll persevere through, which is it's a good thing we have a slideshow here. So as Matt said, it's really just about 4 large overview slides for Latimer Lane. I also want to say how much I enjoyed hosting the tours along with either Susan or Jeff from the board and our Latimer Lane principal, Mike Luzetti. And it was really an opportunity, I think, to, really have the conversation already moving as we get to this workshop tonight. So, so the first one really just has to do with how the board, through the help of Tecton, comes up with the dollar figure that you see. So, Amy, if we can go to the first one of these, if you were somebody who was either on our facilities enrollment task force or paid attention to that work at our public meetings, this is a format that people got very used to seeing over the course of 2020 as we unrolled things. And it's not meant for you to be absorbing this in detail, but just to show Tecton's process and how they get to approximate costs or projected costs. And it's a pretty intense calculation that we, as we all became experts on this, came to understand pretty well. And it has to do first with taking the projected population. As you can see here, this particular example moves out to the year 2930 in taking what the projected population of Latimer Lane might be in that time based on Malone and McBroom's demographic work. Taking that enrollment, there's a multiplying factor having to do with state allowable square footage per pupil. What you note here is that because we had originally had the two projects put together as a sixth grade addition to Henry James plus a renovation to Latimer Lane, we were originally putting this together as a K-5 Latimer Lane proposal. So there is a slight adjustment in here to say that there would, if we went in this order of decoupling the projects and prioritizing Latimer Lane first, there would be a need to temporarily house some sixth grade classes, but you would have a built-in advantage to transform that space to preschool, which in our neighborhood conversations over the course of the winter and spring pre-pandemic in 2020 was a piece of really important feedback from the public that they would like to see preschool in more of our facilities. So on the bottom, there is then costs that the architects figure in for things like site improvements and abatement on older buildings and construction and soft costs. And so that gets us to the figure that ended up on the capital improvement plan, which is roughly, a little less than $37 million. And that's overall cost. But as we like to emphasize that because of the state reimbursements, this would be as a renovate as new reimbursement, which is a higher reimbursement rate than if you build a brand new building. If you renovate as new, you get a higher reimbursement cost. So this roughly 37 million would turn into a cost to the town of Simsbury of 25.7 million, which is the figure that more or less would need to be bonded over time. So this is something that we worked on, this format with Tecton over the course of last year. So wanted to be able to sort of show you and the town how you arrive at that sort of approximate figure.
Hey, Neil.
Yes.
Can I just ask a quick question? What are the ineligibles? What falls in there?
I'll let Jeff Wazinski from Tecton take that one.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So in its simplest form, I'll give you an example. Computers like laptops, where in the past they used to reimburse for equipment such as this. They don't anymore. So there's probably there's a 4-page list of ineligible items that, depending if you're going renovate as new or new, need to be calculated. And what we typically do is we carry about a 4.5% percentage on the overall project, just to be conservative on the ineligible budget. So that's the reason why we carry the 4.5. So it's things like computers, sports equipment that wouldn't otherwise be eligible for reimbursement. Hopefully that answers the question.
So just to that end, though, seriously, though, we have sports equipment and stuff like that in here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want me to take that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so so there's both construction costs that are on the top, and then there's what's called soft costs, and that's the
I get that, but just to cut to the chase, I mean, this shouldn't be for racquetballs and basketballs and that kind of stuff. That stuff exists in schools, and if we're talking about that, that's the kind of stuff that people get concerned about.
Understood. I'll give you, for example, in the soft costs, it's all furniture. Chairs, tables, desks. It's not basketballs themselves, but basketball hoops that are in the athletic space, things like that, ropes. So yes, some of those pieces are included. We can certainly take a harder look at that list.
And I mean, we have not to be overly direct. I mean, we have perfectly good tables and chairs and desks, et cetera. So I hope we're not just throwing everything out and buying everything new under these plans as well. Understood.
There does need to be another level of look at the detail of all of these pieces. That's a piece that as you prepare the grant application, you'll start developing the details for that. So we would look at an existing inventory to make sure that we're not obviously wasting any kind of good materials that are in the school today.
Candidly, I'd want to see that before we send this to the Board of Finance.
Understood.
So just, Sean, a recent example of that would be the project at Henry James, where certainly there's some new furniture, but certainly not all new furniture.
Yeah.
And that's part of the process that happens as these projects move forward.
No, and I get it. Again, when you build new square footage, you need to add new furniture. But I guess, I was just in there, and again, we walked through the cafeteria. We're storing a bunch of furniture, and I would assume we're not throwing that all out and buying new, right? So.
Well, Sean, it's Susan. We're storing a bunch of supplies for the classroom and scholastic things. And of course, we're going to do a full inventory. You saying you want a full soft cost list accounting before it goes to the Board of Finance. That's quite a big job, I think. And I think we're looking to just make this it's a percentage right now. That number would come down most likely, but it's a percentage of what we're looking at.
All due respect, Susan, for $6 million, it needs to be a better number if it's fuzzy. I mean, $6 million of soft cost is a lot of float if we haven't done that analysis.
I would defer to Jeff and Neil on that as to the level of analysis we've done, but we certainly are going to need to upgrade some of the furniture. And, it's hopefully we have a real library. And I mean, it's just, you look at what it would take, might not be $6 million, but it's going to certainly take some funds to furnish the school appropriately in the new space.
No doubt. I'm not talking about the new stuff, but again, we've got plenty of reusable equipment, and I just want to make sure that this analysis has contemplated that. Because again, we're talking about going into territory from a capital standpoint that we've never gone in this community. And we need to turn over every rock to make sure that is $6 million really the number we need on soft costs, or can we do it for 5.5, or can we do it for 5? Because we're talking about $500,000, $1 million that needs to get allocated to real needs throughout the town. And if we don't need to buy $1 million worth of tables and chairs and everything else, and we can reuse that stuff, that's important to know before we send this to the voters.
But it's a fair push, Sean. It's a fair push. We'll take a look.
Okay. Yeah, and can I say 1.65? Where's 6 million?
Where it says soft cost.
A couple lines above it. Yeah,
we're 3 lines above.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Which is just figured in. Again, these were templates that we used for all the buildings, which, as Susan said, were based on a percentage. And that percentage changes when you go to look at it, when you really go to do the work. But this is, I appreciate your point, Sean.
And again, all I'm coming from is again, I was on the tour. There's no question from my standpoint of need. It's how do we do this in the context of the next 20 years or 15 years of capital, right? And it's going to take some extra rocks turning over to figure it out. So that's all I'm coming from, Neil.
Great, thank you. All right, so if we, as sort of kind of when you move to hopefully to referendum, as this project moves hopefully through our boards, and talking about to the town, what's included, what do you get for that amount of money? And really what you get is a building that's at a minimum of 30 years of modern useful life. That is important given that, as many of you will remember from our presentations last year, the average age of our elementary structures, average age in Simsbury, is 75 years for the 5 buildings. So it's important that we be updating most of these buildings. It addresses at Latimer Lane, particularly the population issues are, Latimer Lane is our most stressed building right now in terms of population projections. And it would, by doing that building at the front end or doing it first, it really would help with the overall demographic concerns that the Malone and McBroom report came up with. And in addition, it's modernizing educational space. We're doing a lot of retrofitting of classes that were built in the 50s and 60s in our elementary schools and kind of getting ahead of that game. Number 3 is that idea of renovate as new. And that term is really important. That's as it sounds, that it's renovating as new. It is a transformation of the building. The requirements, if you renovate as new, is to maintain 55% of the base structure, and then from there see what might be demolished and rebuilt. But it's really imagining it as a new structure, which includes things like improving all the existing conditions having to do with life safety and building systems, HVAC, accessibility issues. The next slide kind of puts this at a little bit more detail. In particular, it gets at what happens with the site of the building, not only any ADA issues that might exist as you will find in any building of that age. But I know at the beginning of each tour, we pointed out some of the parking and drop-off challenges, particularly unique to Latimer Lane, perhaps made worse by COVID, but not very good when we were before that. And then looking at terms of landscaping and playgrounds and all of that. On the exterior, certainly thinking of doors, roofs, which are very expensive maintenance projects. We particularly at Latimer on the tour, I know, talked about the windows and the condition of some of that piece of the building and the energy efficiency around that. On the interior, looking, we certainly highlighted the core spaces, some of the tired core spaces in the gymnasium and the cafeteria, the small size of a library for a school of that population. Looking also at specialized spaces, we had you up on the stage in terms of where OT and PT is right now, some of those carved up spaces that we've created offices in, reimagining those as specialized spaces in a newly renovated Latimer Lane. And then, of course, the general classrooms, which right now with K through 6, we have the need for about 22 general classrooms in Latimer Lane. But I think also really importantly is that we are looking at the ability to really start afresh with the building system. So you're taking a fresh look at HVAC, the ability to bring air conditioning to the space, to do security in the sense of not retrofitting things, but to start fresh and looking at what you would want to bring for enhanced security systems, fire suppression, electrical, and I think certainly in terms of things like LED lighting and really green energy, an ability to look at the energy systems of a building in a completely different way. So that is sort of what I would say. When those two slides try to get at what are you getting for your money, and I hope you're feeling that it would be a truly transformed educational space. The last piece that before we stop and take other questions that you have is really just to show you the process where the Board of Education ended up with not only the 6-year capital improvement plan, but where we looked at the long-range plan that Tecton helped us put together. And obviously, at the beginning of this process, we had taken step 1 and 2 together and felt like the best move for our long-range plan was to move a 6th grade addition and Latimer Lane together simultaneously. We understand the debt that would require and the strain that would put on budgets in town. So the decision over the last couple of months of the Board of Education was to decouple the projects and to say which one was the first priority. And I think due to the demographic stresses and the facility stresses, the board landed at the fact that something really needs to be done at Latimer Lane first. And so hopefully that's what our tour was targeted to show you. We would have to make that adjustment to temporarily have it be K6, but we wanted this slide up here to show you that the board firmly still believes in the advantages of a 6th grade placement at Henry James, and believe that the site is ready to accept an addition of a 6th grade wing there that would be an asset to the town over the long term. So that became step 2 when we decoupled the projects. The board on the 6-year capital placed that in year 4 as a way for you to see that remains a priority. But given what Tecton's work is, we wanted to show you that the other elementary schools, this would be a priority order of what needs the most attention. They would fall outside the scope of the next 6 years, certainly, but in order, it would be Squadron Line, which is a 1970 building that has never had any significant renovation done to it, and then Tooten Hills after that. So in terms of what we've put together for you for Latimer Lane, that's what we have tonight. I know most of you were on the tours, and either Jeff or Matt or Susan or Jeff or I are happy to see what other questions the board has.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Before we dig in, I'm wondering if it would be helpful if Amy has it ready to look at the debt curve, if we move forward with this project this year, just so we have that baseline. Is that something that we'd be prepared to share tonight?
Eric, I literally just finished it 5 minutes before this meeting.
Well done, Amy.
So give me, why don't you let them go through the rest of their presentation, and then I'll switch it over while he's talking and we can look at it at the end because it includes everything.
Okay.
Are we moving on from Latimer, or are we still on Latimer here?
No, I think we should take questions for Latimer at this point.
Okay.
Okay. Sean, do you want to begin?
I do. And again, I know that from the BOE and Neil and Matt and everyone, this is a multi-year process. I assume, or talk to me about the process of looking for ways to drive this cost down even further. Again, much like we just talked about soft costs, the analysis that's gone into that, the analysis that's gone into, there's a standard for the footprint, but with COVID and the future and everything else, what level have we gone to drive this from 40 down to 35, if it's even possible, I guess is what I'm asking.
Jeff, you want to take a step at that? I think we're really at the industry standard level, Sean. You know what I mean? At this point in the scope of the project, we haven't taken this and refined it. We had the 2 projects put together, and I think our initial step was to take it from 60 some odd million to 30 million to start the conversation and see what that looked like in terms of debt. We haven't taken the initial design at this point in the project and really tried to drive down the cost.
This is Jeff. That's a great question. So what was presented tonight as far as the projected cost summary was kind of born out of the master plan. So it was kind of based on formulas on state square footages, maximum allowables, industry standard or historical information on costs, not only construction, but soft costs. But the next step in this is to really take a deeper look at renovate as new and new, and then also looking at further details of the existing conditions of not only the FF&E and all the equipment inside, but also the condition of the building when it comes to a renovate as new project. So, but the short answer is that there's another kind of layer to this that's part of the grant application. So you will have to have justification for all of the numbers, more so than just what you saw here tonight. So you will be looking at, in further detail, the cost for roofs, windows, site, pavement, sidewalks, fields, utilities, furniture, equipment. All of those things will be listed into the grant application. So there is some refinement here. Do we think that there's cost savings? Potentially? We can take a look at that. But the analysis, the next step in that is to kind of dig a little bit deeper from what you saw tonight as far as the projected cost summary. But all of those that you saw tonight that Neil presented are based on historical averages. So they're pretty close to where we believe they will come in.
Yeah, if I could just drive that last point home quickly, Jeff, Sean, just again, these costs are average costs, right? I just want to diffuse a rumor I'd heard that, we're trying to build the Cadillac, right? That is not the case. Again, as Jeff, I just want to say it again and maybe beat the dead horse, but these are average costs.
Yeah. Okay. And again, I'm not insinuating one way or another. You guys have been very, very close to it, just, in getting us fully up to speed on it.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. It's a fair question. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And then, so, if I recall correctly, and I'm dating myself here, but the high school project came in under budget, and so there was an appropriated amount, and then there was a spent amount, and that money was then reallocated back to other capital projects. But Amy, walk me through. If we appropriate 26 from the town side, 25 and change, that can get spent on Latimer, right? So I appreciate that it gets refined later on, and again, maybe I'm inserting myself into a time-tested process here, but how do the taxpayers realize the potential savings? I guess is what I'm asking, Amy.
So what we did, we haven't done it yet because we haven't officially closed out the project, but once the state is done auditing the project, if we bonded for that extra, say, $1 million that they're projecting in savings, we reduce our borrowing in the future for any other town or Board of Ed related projects. So you're basically like reducing your debt going forward by not having to bond for it.
Okay. So
is that what happened with the high school, or did they actually spend it on other projects? I don't recall.
No,
Neil, do you know?
I do know. It was because there were definitely, I was the principal at the time, and there were other things I wanted to see happen, but it was returned to the town for that purpose that Amy just described.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's important to note here, right? Chris, sorry, let me just finish the train of thought is again, when we talk about this number, it's not, so folks understand at home, it's, and I don't mean it to sound this way, but this is the highest number, right? That gets sent on to the taxpayers. But the Board of Ed and the town has a really rich history of coming in under budget and ahead of time. And I think that's important to note here too, because I believe those savings were in the multi-millions, right, Neil, from the high school side?
Yeah, my memory was between 5 and 6 million.
Yeah, and that's pretty substantial, right? So, and again, I'm not suggesting that this project would have to come in the same, but again, the Board of Ed and the school system by no means runs with a blank check and spends it up to the max. That's not what happens here. So I think that's important for us to remember too, as much as I'm pushing on the soft costs and everything else, that you folks have done an outstanding job in the past of managing these projects. So
thank you, Sean.
Chris, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just the comments and questions. Far be it for me to I feel like this is going to be the game show with the Board of Finance, where the Board of Selectmen has its budget, and then we go back and they say you've got to trim 5-10% of your budget, and go back and forth, and it's like we're we're watching Pawn Stars or something. But, far be it for me to say that you need to reduce this by $5, $7, $10 million, whatever it is. I don't think we can. I don't think it's fair to do that. That's not what Sean's asking, but I'm fairly confident if you tell me that this project, which from my understanding is essentially educational space. There's no additional labs. There's no addition. I mean, you have the auditorium and the gym surfacing, but that's to accommodate the complement that you have there, which you're growing into. So if I'm correct, it's really additional learning space to accommodate the growth. We're not doing anything special there that we could ask you to say, what, we need you to take $5 million off, and this room equals $5 million, which is, I think, what we did at the junior high, right? You had the 18 million or 20. I don't know, all these numbers get sort of lost, but we had some additional space in the junior high, which was performing based, which we said, no, let's take that back and get you to just the core of what is essentially educational learning space. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, Chris, that was yep, you're absolutely right. It was a conversation about the auditorium, additional square footage, and whether that was a need or kind of a want, and how we were to look at that. So this renovation is certainly different. It's a refurbishing of the core spaces that we have. And as you said, classroom space to accommodate for what's coming down the road.
Yeah, so
a little bit of a different scenario. Yeah,
I do think that there's work to be done. To Sean's point about it's where I know that the process we're at a hard place, right? Because we're coming up against what's deliverable from that level of review before we go past no return date, and then we flip over once again, and then whatever we may find in savings then gets eaten up in cost of good increases over the next 12 months. And I'm not saying that's a reason not to skip over that level of detail, but I think it's a fine balance. For me, I don't have a number in my head of what this project should or shouldn't cost, or what you need to reduce it by, or increase it by. That's not the way I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this from you telling us that this is, that's my alma mater to a certain extent. When I was at Neil, I was embarrassed. It's some of the space in there. I mean, it's like like I said, it's just like some shell of a manufacturing city post the 2009 financial crisis. And be walking through some of the school assets they have in there. So there's no doubt for me that something needs to be done. You're not going to get that, but it is. This is a massive undertaking, as Sean's mentioning. Everybody else knows this, that we're laying on the town. The townspeople, and I think that we just need to know, and I like the fact it's average cost, that there's nothing in here other than pure educational space to accommodate what we've grown out of and what we're growing into. I think, and the last point I'll make is and I asked this of you, Neil, and you don't need to. I'm not saying I'm holding this against you, but I think one of the things that we were effective with our last budgets is the mailer. I call them one pagers. So they're just fact based. If we could talk, when we put this forward, help 14-page PowerPoints with sliding graphs and all that. You're whistling through my head at some point if I'm a taxpayer. I want something that's clear, concise, unlike my presentation right now, but something that's very clear and concise when it's that this building was built in X year. The enrollment was Y. And that's what I asked Neil. I said, well, what was this building built for? How many students? Now we know students learn differently and a classroom is designed differently, but the number of students per classroom, I don't think we've really ever changed off that 22 or 23 target. So what was that building designed for? And where are we now? And where is it going? That kind of easy data, I think, helps people understand why we're making this kind of decision, other than just adding on adding an auditorium to the junior high because we don't have one and we need to do that kind of a thing. I mean, so that's what I would like to see come out of this project to help us tell the story.
Very good. Thank you.
Wendy.
Wait, find my unmute. So I do I know we're talking about the capital budget that, this year's budget, but I at some point I would have some general questions on the years 2 through 6. But right now my question is on Latimer, and I was on the technology task force. So, I understand the needs. I've gone through the presentations at Tecton a few times. And I just want to reiterate and confirm that Latimer is being built as a K through 6 school, which I know it says that, and that can handle enrollment projections over the next few years if we have to keep it at a K through 6. Because we're looking out the 5 years and we see Henry James out there, which we could talk about. But as a standalone K through 6, how is it good for the enrollment projections for the next X number of years?
So Wendy, that's where we're saying that's that flexible space. We heard through the facilities and enrollment task force that people want us to spread pre-K throughout the town. So
Right.
That's where we're going to say 6th grade's there now, with the hope that if we get Henry James on a 6th grade edition, we would then move the pre-K throughout town. Right now it's all housed at Squadron Line, which is where it has room.
But the 6th grade will be able to maintain itself as a 6th grade as long as we need it, is really what I'm asking.
Yeah, the answer is yes. I can jump in. So we took the highest enrollment in an 8-year period, which was 2029, 2030. So in that detailed chart that Neil had reviewed, that's kind of the highest enrollment over that period that Malone and McBroom projected. So the short answer to your question is yes, it will accommodate all the way up into those projections. And then after that, the 3,600 square feet or so can be easily converted into pre-K.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Wendy, do you have any other questions?
Not on this year.
Okay. I just had a question for our partners at Tecton. When you're renovating a school as new, how many compromises are you making, or how limited are you based on that 55% footprint versus if you were able to reimagine a school from scratch? And I'm not suggesting we spend more than we're talking about, but I just want to make sure we're getting the building that we really want that's going to be good for those 30 plus years.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Our renovated new projects, you completely reinvent the school in its entirety. So I think the idea would be not to sacrifice anything. We do need to do an analysis as part of the grant application, new versus renovated is new, not only from a cost benefit analysis, but from a programmatic standpoint as well. And the ultimate goal, and we've done both, we've done renovated new and new schools, obviously. The ultimate goal is to make sure that there are no programmatic or educational compromises there, so that it's really, so you're really weighing things like disruption, schedule, and costs, but not sacrificing the programmatic need. So to answer your question, I think it is difficult for some to kind of see past what's in front of you as far as what the building condition is and understand a brand new building, but I guess you have to trust me a little bit on this one, that you can completely reimagine and transform a building that exists today and meet all of the educational needs that are needed. So,
okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
Before we go on to Amy's model, I wanted to see if there were other questions on Latimer specifically. Okay, Amy, all yours.
Okay. You want me to do a quick overview?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So everything in black is your existing debt. That's nothing that we can change. It's already debt that we are paying on or will be paying on coming this fiscal year. This little line with the green and the white, that's our cash capacity. So if you recall in prior years, the Board of Finance wants us to keep our debt and capital under 6.7%. So since we're not at the 6.7%, which is this blue line right here, we have some cash capacity to use. So for fiscal year 22, theoretically, that would be $518,000. And we move on to here. So these are all of the town and Board of Ed projects that do not include Latimer and do not include the 6th grade addition to Henry James, if you have already reviewed your capital plan and your budget book. And then this hot pink is the Latimer Lane project, the first issuance. And then this light pink is the Latimer Lane project, the second issuance. And then you move on to blue is your fiscal year 25 issuance. Again, everything except for the Latimer Lane and the Henry James. And then the Henry James 6th grade edition is your orange and your light orange for your first issuance and your second issuance. And then your final bar up here is your fiscal year 27 issuance, again, for everything town and board outside of those two projects. So then here is your 6.7% line, which is where we're at right now as related to approved guidance from the Board of Finance. And then you have this purple line, which is at 7%. And then you have your yellow line, which is 8%. And then up here, I did a 10% line as well, this grade. So this is not just want to say this is not the approved capital plan by the Board of Selectmen. This is what you all will be reviewing at the workshop on Saturday.
Just the gray includes the Henry James. Is that what you said, Amy?
Yes. So the Henry James is this dark orange and the light orange. And then the fiscal year 27 is the gray.
Okay, so they're well over. I think the yellow is 8%, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which is the guidance we got was 7% from the Board of Finance. The guidance I think we got was 7%, right? But potentially to 8% because of the low interest rates. That's true, right?
Yeah, so I think they said they've always been at 6.7, but they are willing to look at an increase up to 8%.
So as soon as 2024, we're going over their guidance?
Well, if you use the 8%, we're still under it. If you use the 7% or the 6.7, yes, we are going over their guidance.
That's where they've been right now.
Right.
Yeah, I know it might move to 8.
Yep.
And Amy said that's again, speaking to the 8, it's a 6. I mean, you're basically over it for 6 years, right? You've got 25 through or 26 through 33.
Well, yeah, this plan is only through fiscal year 27. So as we start to build in those other projects, all of
right,
them will go up.
Adding those in, adding those in brings you. I mean, it's a 6-year root canal. Looks like.
Well, it's more than that though, Chris, because again we're layering on more, so it could stay at that 10%.
For a while.
For a long while, depending on what we do. And that's what I think the Board of Finance is also asked to do, is not just hit a debt number this year, but look at the entirety of the 6-year plan, because the reality is the town and the education side, if we do step 1, we can't have everything in the next 5 years. We need to make some hard choices in terms of what truly stays on the capital plan and what comes off or what comes down is the equation here, right?
So
and it's, Eric, if I can jump in, the bonds that we're using, are those 10-year bonds, 15-year bonds?
I'm so glad you asked that because I just wanted to jump in. So everything that is a normal, quote unquote, normal issuance, I use 10-year because that's what the Board of Finance has approved. And then for the school projects, I use 15-year. I know there's been discussion about going anywhere from like 20, 25, even 30, depending on some of the projects. I'm not entirely sure where the Board of Finance is on that. But again, I did use 15 years, so there probably is some room to play with different amortization schedules.
Okay, because I know for me, I'm concerned about going beyond. 15 is kind of my limit for the Board of Ed. 20 is definitely, I wouldn't want to go beyond, because you're going to have to renovate and do stuff. And I'd be afraid we still got those bonds and we're backing ourselves into a corner, and we're too smart to end up like Hartford did with their bonds. Thank you.
Just a clarification and then a question. So, we're looking at like 8 years that are, well above the guidance, which, it looks scary, but if it were only 8 years, maybe it's something we could stomach. But if I'm understanding correctly, this assumes we do nothing else with the rest of the facilities master plan. And we know there's more capital coming, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
No, so that's not entirely true. Well, on the Board of Ed side, nothing else is in there except for the Henry James 6th grade and the Latimer. But on the town side, there is some projects in there that are related to the tecton study that was just done.
Right. But I guess what I'm asking is we would also be adding in the Squadron project and the Tooten project in, much later years, which presumably would keep us above that, well above that 8% line if we, kept on that path. That's a question. I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, if we were to keep on that path, yes. I don't know what the intentions are as far as renovating each of the schools or if this is the priority and they do something different. I haven't been that involved with the detail of those discussions. So, but yes, if they were to go down that route, then yes, we would be over 10 for a while.
My other question, and I'm definitely not suggesting this, but if this project were to be pushed by some number of years, whether it's, let's say, 2 years, does this curve change dramatically? Does the story change if we're able to push it even a couple of years?
That's a good question. I think it kind of the only reason why I'm hesitating is because when our bond advisor gave the presentation, there was a sweet spot in 1 year where our debt drops quite considerably. But I'm pretty sure that's already reflected in this chart. But I will go back and check just in case.
Okay. What other questions does the board have? Okay.
On what? Like relating to this or in general or?
Well, I want to go on to the rest of the capital if there's no other questions on Latimer.
No, not on Latimer.
Okay.
I would say no more, but again, the challenge is this isn't a one and done, right, Eric? Because we're going to have to then look at the capital plan in the entirety and come back and figure out how does that all fit in. And again, nobody here is suggesting the number gets lower, right? But it's the question of when and how. And then again, the other projects that we're going to talk about here, because, every $100,000 is going to count from here on out for capital because, we've got legitimate needs on the town side. We've got legitimate needs on the Board of Ed side. And then we've got to have some really tough conversations about what might have been a legitimate need, but does it cross back into the nice to have barrier because we have to have other things first. And I think that's really got to be a collaborative conversation as we get into that uncomfortable territory here going forward.
Yeah.
And Eric, I just would like to add, if you start discussing pushing Latimer down the road, then there are going to be some needs we need to address for that building to move forward without it being a major project. So there will be additional funds we would need to address issues at Latimer in the meanwhile.
Yeah.
It's not a all or nothing.
Yeah, I understand. And I want folks to know I'm not suggesting, I just want to know all the levers we have at our disposal to keep that, debt curve as palatable as possible.
Can I just one quick question on Latimer, just to clarify? You just brought something up. The Neil, I apologize. Maybe you answered this question. I was there. The therapy space that is up on the stage, currently parked up behind the curtains, is that where it was pre-COVID, or is that because of COVID?
That's because of COVID, Chris.
Okay, so they not ideal, but they did have kind of a space,
an OTPT space that we had in a split classroom. Kind of multiple tutor spaces on one side, therapy spaces on the other side.
Is that so? Is that an example then of what was just alluded to, that if we did not do the Latimer Lane project, but that would be something that would have to be immediately addressed? Is that an example of that kind of comment?
Yeah, well, one of the things that's happening at Latimer is that the demographics, the larger classes that are coming in are the younger classes, K1, 2. So that is certainly, like, if we knew this project was going to be approved and a new Latimer Lane was going to open at some date in the, pick 3 years out or whatever it is, I mean, there is stress on that building right now. I mean, if it wasn't that space there, you might see instruments being played in that space. I mean, that space is very tight right now, which is why it's the number one priority for the Board of Ed.
Right. Okay. If there's no other questions on Latimer right now, why don't we move on to the next capital need?
Great. Thanks, Eric. Jason has I believe, a couple slides on the bleacher project that we moved forward last year. It was moved out. I know the Board of Selectmen made the decision to move out the process. And I think Jason's tried to segment it a little bit to better understand the cost. And we've reduced the scope a little bit that we wanted to share with you tonight to try to find some savings from the initial estimate. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you. So to start off with just a quick refresher, these are the bleachers from the 1960s. Problems include being not ADA compliant and also having just general old age issues with with this equipment, and also storage space underneath, which is leaking. So last year, this was the $850,000 renovation that we were requesting, replacement. If you flip to the next slide. We've decreased this from 850 to 600,000, essentially by reducing the amount of seats we were asking for. So we recognize that the student population at this school has gone up significantly. The use of these athletic fields has gone up significantly since the 1960s when this was built. But we believe we can still work with stands that seat in the 900 range instead of going up to a capacity that more mirrors what the student body looks like. So that's where that 600,000 figure comes from. If I can hit the next slide. So two things have happened since the last time we talked about these bleachers. The bleachers were inspected as they get inspected, and the inspection did show that they do not meet the current safety codes or ADA requirements, although these bleachers do predate those codes, so they are grandfathered in. But the recommendation from the inspection was to have them replaced. Also in that time, we had a study done to refine those designs and pull out exactly what the specific costs were that they include. So it is shown here on the left side of the slide, roughly 100,000, 125 to do the demolition and disposal, and then approximately 445 for the bleacher and press box rebuild, and then an additional 30,000 to renovate that storage space, which, as I mentioned, is leaking and has other problems as well, crumbling, animal intrusion. So as we requested last year, the bleachers still need to be renovated. Now we come back with a 600,000 figure for a slightly smaller bleacher. I can take questions on this or move on to the last piece.
Let's pause here, Jason. I appreciate the ability to bring the cost down by shrinking the number of seats. How often, would you need 900 seats if it were not for football? Are there other sports where this would be filled to capacity?
I don't know. I can jump in on that one if you want. Yeah, very few, Eric. The football games are certainly the largest crowds of the year, but you would get large crowds at some of our track meets. We have held events where many schools are arriving, and it can be, but that's more where people will wander the perimeter and kind of do their thing. The certain playoff games for soccer or lacrosse, maybe, but very rarely would you need a capacity, beyond what this scope is.
Okay. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it really sounds like 900 then would meet the needs.
We believe it would, although in this day and age, when you see those packed bleachers, it's a different feel than it was pre-COVID. I mean, it wouldn't be as tightly spaced together.
Yeah.
So yes, it does meet the need. When putting in this kind of an expansion, I think the initial goal was to make sure we were future-proofing the project as much as possible. But to your point, yes.
Okay. Are there other questions on the bleacher project?
Eric, this is Sean. I do. So for my Board of Ed friends, when we stack this up against the fire alarms and other renovations of the school buildings, et cetera, where does this one rank out?
For me, Sean, this one is a high priority. It's a safety issue. We've got youth sports who use those fields and the bleachers, and we've got tons of students. And given the town we are, Friday night lights, if you will, we get a lot of kids up there all fall. So for me, knowing the safety compromises, this is high for me on the list.
So just to be overly blunt about it, Susan, that means that if we had to cut $500,000 somewhere else in the 6-year plan, we'd be willing to cut other stuff and keep these in?
I suppose that would depend on what that trade-off would look like. But I think this is a high priority because, again, it's for the whole community. It's not just a school.
No doubt. I'm not second guessing it. I'm just asking because, again, we're going to go through a really painful exercise and we're going to cut real needs on the town side. And we're going to come back and ask you guys to cut real needs on the Board of Ed side. And
are you talking about out years or first year?
Out years. Because of, again, when we do Latimer, right, guys? I mean, we're putting our backs against the wall.
Yeah.
For 15 years. And I want to support the schools in the long range plan. And I'm not second guessing that. But again, it forces us to make $500,000 decisions on priorities for the next 14 years.
Right. I fully appreciate that. I really do. And certainly we're willing to work with whatever we can. At this point, it's one of those situations we have kicked this can down the road. This Latimer Lane's been on the capital improvement plan, which predates me joining the board in 2007 and predates me by many years. There comes a point in time where, we've got to do the responsible thing here. And it's hard, but it still needs to get done.
So I just want to ask to clarify, in my budget paperwork, it has 850. Are we saying that that's 600 now, or is it?
Yes.
Okay, so the 600, but then if we look at the out years, there's still a bunch of related projects to the stadium, right? There's the storage in year 2, then there's the restrooms, the phase 1 for restrooms and kitchen in year 4, and then there's the turf construction in year 6. So I was just trying to figure out, is there somewhere that there's a description of those projects that we could have too, as we look at this thing in whole? I mean, is that documented somewhere?
The athletics director has put that together.
We could provide that. Sure.
I'm just curious because I don't really know what that means and the value, it'd be nice for us if we're looking at the whole 6 years to figure out what we need to juggle for debt. To kind of understand what those are. I don't know if anybody else on the board would like to see that, but I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for requesting that, Wendy. Were there other questions on the bleachers?
Eric, this is Mike. I think Sean's point is a good one. I know we're going to get pushback from the Board of Finance, and that's their job, but we're going to be scrambling and I actually should have started out by saying thank you to the Board of Ed for reducing the bleacher dollars needed. You guys are really killing me, I got to admit, between the Latimer Lane project and the stadium. they're both places that I went to school with, and they're my formative years. So I'm not sure what you're saying about me, but they are projects we need to do, but we're really going to have a tough 15 years. So we really have to sharpen our pencil everywhere. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, if there's no other questions on bleachers, let's move on.
Okay, the last piece of capital, I don't have a slide for, but it's essentially a continuation of the security projects that we've been doing. So we're requesting an additional $250,000. These are items like improving the vestibules and main entrances, improving burglar alarm systems, and blue light systems, alerting people of issues going on within the buildings.
Other questions on this project? See, with safety, you got us. We're right there.
Yeah.
Okay, before
safety issue though.
Yeah. I wanted to open up for any additional questions. I want to see, is there anything else that the Board of Ed wanted to share with us at this point? Okay. Were there any other questions from the Board of Selectmen?
Well, I have one. I don't know if anybody, I don't want to take the floor if somebody else does first.
Oh, go ahead, Wendy.
The only question I had, so we're looking at Henry James in year 4, which is really going to be the harder part, right? Trying to figure out when that can get done. But I did have a question on the year before the Henry James project. We're doing a $3.6 million roof replacement. And I was just curious why. It's probably a different part of the roof, but why would we do the construction on Henry James in 2 different years like that?
I'll take that one, Wendy. I think that's a great question. When we had our workshop with the board, we had the two projects coupled together. We had the Latimer and the Henry James coupled together. We were looking for the ideal kind of place in the scope of our work to move the Henry James, but that's something we could definitely look at. I mean, I think that's a good example of either combining things or prioritizing things and moving things around within the 6 years. So I think that's a, you know, as we talk and we work our way through this and you guys have questions, those are areas that we can give feedback on and things that can probably be moved and merged together.
And then the same with the school, other roofing, like the urgency. Did that come out of the Tecton plan? Remind me.
We've always had a roofing replacement plan, but Jeff with Tecton really helped us to firm that up and prioritize and re-inspect where we are. But we do get those roofs inspected on an annual basis. Okay. And it's been an approach like we've done on the town side, right? We've patched and we've repaired and we've bumped things down the road until they kind of build up. So, but it was part of Tecton as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Hey, Matt.
Yep.
There's a roof going on the high school, correct? They're doing a bid for that right now?
Correct.
So is that in this year's budget?
No, that was approved last year, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for the Board of Ed tonight? Well, you know, I know this has been the topic of countless meetings on the Board of Ed.
Eric, Eric, Chris, I do have a question.
Okay.
Paving, just as purely educational, paving of school properties, are those undergone as part of a capital improvement under your folks' board, or is that something that Tom Roy includes potentially in his plan when we look at the, you know, paving everything we have in town for over 10 years kind of thing? It's just curious because paving is a massive cost, as you guys all know. Anybody have perspective on that?
My understanding, Chris, is that those are projects we've taken on our own and haven't joined with the town's long-term planning on at this point, anyhow.
Correct.
Thanks.
Okay. Great. Well, I appreciate this conversation. You know, I was just saying that you have had countless meetings on your side of the house, and we're asking a lot of questions that, you know, you've been thinking about for many years. And I think there's a level of change management required with projects of this kind. And I appreciate this conversation. This is probably something we should be doing on an annual basis, and sometimes perhaps not even waiting until budget season. Thank you. Maria, I know that there were some things that you wanted to share with us related to your budget before we break for executive session.
Yeah, just as part of a wrap up and getting ready to have our larger capital discussion on Saturday and looking what was presented to us this evening, there's sort of three major pieces I really see as helping to help this puzzle, come together as we're looking at our long-term capital needs. And I think, having that serious conversation, again, at a policy level about generational equity and how we pay for larger scale projects such as the Latimer renovation or the Henry James expansion. And, is 15 years really appropriate, given the scope and scale, is 20 or 25 years, maybe even 30 years more appropriate. I think, we'll find and see that, many communities, when they're doing something of this scope and scale, do spread it out over, a longer term. And again, a part of that is the generational equity, right? Because those renovations, that expansion, it's going to have a much longer useful life than a 15-year period. So I think that's, something, again, at a policy level, we need to really, kind of settle on. A second piece, and I know for the Board of Selectmen, I'm a bit of a broken record. I've been sharing this since I arrived, but, we really have a need to build up our cash capacity for our smaller capital items that are under, $500,000 in value. So we're not bonding for those items. And that again frees up debt capacity. I think we have some opportunities to do that through year-end savings by building up the capital reserve, doing that through capital project closeouts and building up the capital reserve. And, I'm very optimistic based on the current growth and development interest that we have in town and some continued interest we see on the horizon, that if we continue to have some incredibly strong years with the new growth, thinking about dedicating some of that new growth to building up that cash capacity. And again, I think it's, freeing up the debt capacity for the projects that are, again, larger in scope and that really matter, and paying for the small items in cash. So we're not, taking on that debt service. The third piece, which again, I think is, going to be a collaborative effort. And, I'm really appreciative of the good working relationship that I have with Matt. We're sharing financial management services now. And I know your two boards have very, very good working relationships. And I think it's, coming together to see, what we may be able to defer or push out. Just a quick, for example, for just to help educate the Board of Ed about our capital plan, we have some items in out years. There are a couple of projects at some point in time, we know we will receive an order from DEEP to do some work on our Stoddard Reservoir and Dam, as well as some work at the transfer station. We haven't received those orders yet, and they may not come to fruition in 6 years, but those are two really large, ticket items for us that may not come to fruition in the next 6 years. And so again, those are examples of things that, we could, pull off and, hope for the best if, they continue to remain in a condition in which we don't receive an order from DEEP. So again, I think it's just going to be working together and in terms of, staggering some projects and maybe deferring some things that aren't quite as imminent. But again, I feel really good about the working relationship of everybody here at the table. And I think we'll be able to find a solution to this so we can move forward with, the important projects we need at Latimer and Henry James.
Thanks, Maria. Are there any immediate questions for Maria? Okay. I will see if there is a motion to adjourn to executive session. Let me just pull up my cheat sheet for who will be joining us.
Sorry, Eric, just quickly, under 1C, that item for the health district that Mike Payne wanted to raise.
Yes,
Thank you.
There's something we wanted to add.
Thanks. Great. Mike, would you like to tee that up?
There we go. I'm unmuted. Lucky you guys. Yes, I did have an issue I would like to talk about. Eric, do you want me to make a motion?
Yeah, why don't you do that, Mike?
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Actually, Mike, I think that's already under item 1C on the agenda, how I had labeled that as part of the town manager's proposed budget. I think you could definitely talk about the health district item right under that. So. Okay,
so we would not need a motion. I could just talk about it. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that clarity.
Yeah, no problem.
Earlier today, we got an email about the Farmington Valley Health District working on their budget, and would we be willing to support that? As has been our past practice, I wanted to let them know how much we appreciate everything they've done, especially during this COVID year, and really felt it would be a more than just a gesture, but an appropriate action for us to take, just in a letter supporting them, and would really like to see us do that.
Yeah, I agree, Mike.
I agree.
Is I don't know what the timeline is as far as how quickly we would need to move on that. Would there be time enough for us to be able to review a letter in the next week?
I thought that they had a board meeting today, and I informally talked to Maria and Melissa that we wouldn't have time to do it, but I would think they would appreciate it, for lack of a better term, but I'll let Melissa straighten me out.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Actually, you do. Since we spoke earlier today, we did have a board meeting today. The public hearing on the health district budget was initially scheduled for today. We ended up postponing it until March 23rd, just because we had a minor technical concern with the wording in the legal notice, and just out of an abundance of caution, we decided to renotice it. So you would actually have an opportunity to provide any comment, before then, should you wish to do so. So, and I do think that, if you so desire, they would appreciate it. And especially
in that case, my vote would be to review, if the team could draft a letter that we could review either Saturday or at one of our meetings next week. That would be great. Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah, you've got it. Absolutely.
I assume we want to see the budget that we're supporting.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll probably talk about it Saturday, I'll bet.
Well, that's our allocated cost, right?
Oh, that's true.
So if we could we'll need to get a copy of that budget just to make sure that I'm sure it's fine, but just for crossing our T's and dotting our I's, we'd want to see it before we wrote a letter of support for it.
Of course.
And that would probably be a proposed budget because they haven't had their public hearing to approve it. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other?
That'd be great.
Great. Thanks for bringing it up, Mike. Any other business on the budget before we go to executive session? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss the Meadowwood acquisition? We would be joined by Honor Lawler, Maria Capriola, Bob DiCrescenzo, Mike Glidden, Jeff Shea, Tom Taberski, Amy Merriweather, and Melissa Appleby.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks,
Appreciate it.
everybody.
Have a nice-
Join us for-
Thank you, guys.